This is one of the tracks, if not the best track I have ever reviewed in this channel, that showcases the power of dynamic range in music. Welcome back to the channel! Today we're coming back to Depeche Mode, and the song in question is gonna be The Policy of Truth from the album Violator. And a disclaimer or a spoiler alert, you might not know it, but I happen not to be a fan of the band, but there are some songs that I have discovered thanks to you and your recommendations here on YouTube, that I have discovered some songs that I actually happen to love. And this one in particular is one of those tracks. And I gotta tell you, a spoiler alert as well, this song is a masterclass on music production. So if you wanna see my reaction to it and analyze it together, well, you know what to do. Simply stick around. But before I go, if this is your first time on the channel, I welcome you because in here we analyze the music that we love from the perspective of an active musician and professional music producer, using language that anybody can understand in a way to expand our knowledge when it comes to music production and songwriting. So with that being said, let's rock and roll. Here we go! So here we go, Policy of Truth by Depeche Mode. Okay, the first thing that I gotta notice, or I gotta point out, is the sound of the vocals. The sound of the vocals is just great. I love the use of a particular effect on his sound of his vocals, which is known as reverb. Reverb stands for a device that we use to recreate the sound of a space through artificial methods, and it sounds like this, reverb. But one thing that you can notice on the sound of his vocals is that the reverb used on him is quite large in sound, but also the release the release tail of the sound of the reverb is super long. What do I mean by that? As soon as the sound is produced, the reverb starts to do the reverberation, the kind of echoey sound like thing, but also you have control over how long that sound is gonna be present in the mix before it fades out. And in this case, we got a very long release tail that adds a lot of texture. It's not trying to hide itself or trying to sound like it's been used to recreate the sound of a space. It's actually been used as a creative effect to give an emotional texture, an extra texture of emotion to the sound of his vocals. That's why it sounds dreamy and eerie and also kind of ethereal, if that makes sense to you. Quite cool. Larger than life effect, but well, we're talking about Depeche Mode and they're very good at creating those sounds that are very larger than life. Now, another thing, I gotta say that I love the use of the synthesizers because this song is not that dense in the sense of having that many things happening at the same time, but it's still extremely layered. Don't you think? There are so many things that could be clashing, but they're not. The song sounds open, expansive, yet it's always proposing something extra that will add a little bit of the ear candy, and it's always capturing your attention. There is always something going on that will, ooh, that was interesting. Ear candy is the word that I would use to describe the sound of Depeche Mode in general. Now, another thing that I want to point out, you saw that I switched the analyzer on the screen to something called the stereo field analyzer. In there, you can see that the frequency response is projected on the left side, and it gives you at the very bottom the darkest, the lowest frequency that our human hearing can understand, which is 20,000, all the way up to the highest, which is 20,000. Sorry, 20 and 20,000. And that line that you see moving represents the which on which side of the stereo spectrum, left and right, each of the different frequencies are taking place. That's important because when you're mixing music, you use the panning on your desk or on your computer to position those instruments or sounds across the stereo field. Let me elaborate more on the concept of a stereo field. When I mentioned that, in mind that, of course, you have your stereo pair of headphones or your speakers. You got the left, the right, and what happens in between, which is known as the phantom center. Through the use of panning, you can not only position the instruments, but also allow for certain sounds to have more room to develop. I don't know if that makes sense to you. And in this case, we got a mix that has an incredible use of the panning, the stereo field, in a way that lets any of the different sounds or parts of this very busy mix to interact with each other without sounding crowded or cramped in. So well done. One more thing, if you happen to know anything about the drums, please let me know, because I think there's something funky going on with them. Not only because you got some elements of the drum kit happening on this side and then some others on this other side, particularly the cymbals. Pay attention to it once I press play again. But you also got this quasi mix between a real life drummer, but also a drum machine. So if you happen to know some details about the recording or production of this mix, please let me know, because that's something that I think something funky is going on. So let's continue, because next time we talk, we're going to be discussing the mix itself. So here we go.
Things could be so different now. It used to be so civilized. You will always wonder how it could have been if you'd only lied. It's too late to change events. It's time to face the consequence for delivering the proof in the policy of truth. Never again is what you swore the time before. Never again is what you swore the time before. Now you're standing there tongue-tied. You better learn your lesson well. Hide what you have to hide, and tell what you have to tell. You'll see your problems multiply if you continually decide to faithfully pursue the policy of truth. Never again is what you swore the time before. Never again is what you swore the time before.
That section over there was fantastic. It reminded me quite a lot to Pink Floyd, due to the fact that it's super dark sounding, like cinematic, but also the use of those sequencers on the sides, the sequencers, the synthesizers playing on the sides of the stereo field in a very kind of robotic, but how can I put it, intense and dark fashion, which is one of the ways that Depeche Mode music is described as, right? Kind of dark, intriguing, mysterious, yeah, all of those elements. And it was such a cool section. During that part, there was a particular effect applied to those synthesizers that is known as delay, and it sounds like this: delay, 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 delay. And as you can tell, it's creating repetitions of the sound of my voice. And in this case, it was used on the synthesizers, and you saw that it got even a particular rhythmic pattern to it. So cool, so cool. Now let's talk about the mix. Here we go. Over here we got Decibel, which is the tool that we use to analyze music through the use of a visual medium. The first section that we're going to be taking a look at is going to be the frequency range analyzer, which is over here, and it's giving us the loudness of each of the frequencies that are part of the human hearing range, which is 20 all the way down to 20,000, and this white line represents how loud they were at the highest with the highest point in volume of each of those frequencies throughout the performance of the track or the playback of the track. And we can see here that we got a nice and very controlled low end, not as insanely loud as I would have expected, but being frank, this is a record from a completely different era. And in this time period, or this period of time, sorry, we got an approach to mixing that was a little bit more natural sounding, because nowadays our records are super loud, and not only that, they have plenty of low end. And some of them have way more low end that I would consider to be correct, but that's a matter of opinion. Tell me what you think about that. And here we see that we don't have that much incredibly subby low end, which in more mixing terminology, this section is usually dangerous to work with, because this is where we find the rumble on our mix. Rumble stands for those frequencies that are way too low in frequencies. Well, we were talking about super low end frequencies that happen to be that low, that are so close to the point on which we are unable to understand them through the use of our human ears. And I know that it sounds kind of weird when I say human ears, but bear in mind that we are understanding music and understanding sound through the devices that are built in our heads that behave as the interfaces between us and sound, and they have a particular way to understand that sound. So even though we might hear it in a way, that doesn't mean that it's the absolute truth. It's simply the way we understand it. It's the way that we are interfacing with sound. I know I went a little bit too philosophical, but I hope that made sense to you. And you can see here that we got now a much more and in my opinion, better a section to work with when it comes to low end, because this is where we find the weight, the kick, and the punchiness of everything that is low endy. And when you can tell, or what you can tell is that the mix itself has plenty of this section, which is the low end. And here we got the powerful bass, the powerful kick drum, and the ambience and this darkness that makes Depeche Mode feel the way it does. Because see how much it contrasts with the high end and the mid range in particular. This is the loudest. In here we find the rest of the cymbals, some of the snappiness of the snare, the vocals. And this accident here, I assume that it's one of the special effects that happened during one of those more complex rhythmical parts on the drum kit. So yeah, not surprising at all, but it has, in my opinion, a very beautiful representation of the stereo of the frequency range. I know, kind of nerdy, but well, that's the kind of people I am. Now let's take a look to the second section of our analyzer. Here we got the dynamic range. And dynamic range is, in my opinion, the most important aspect of music, because it is through dynamic range that we can develop the sense and convey the motion of evolution in music. Let me explain. When you have a sound that is quiet in nature, your brain will understand it as it being more intimate and closer to you, sexier, darker, and mysterious. And in contrast, when you get a loud sound, you will understand it as aggressive, more exciting, interesting, and attention grabber, okay? And usually you're gonna find more fun out of a loud signal than what you would get out of a quiet signal. But it is due to the interaction between quiet parts and loud parts that we get great sounding music. And this track, it's an actual great and masterful example of how to use dynamic range to create a better sounding track. You can clearly tell the different sections of the song just by looking at the volume of it. This blue blob represents how loud the song was throughout time, starting here all the way down to the end, following this pattern. The louder it gets, the higher this blue blob will go. And you can see that this is the introduction. Here is where the vocals kicked in during the verse, and here is the first chorus. So cool. And this is the reason why the chorus in this track hits you so hard, because the track let the music build momentum, and when it has to go harder, you push the fader just to make it a little bit more impactful, but in a way that you don't notice. You feel it. Let me show you the second section of the track, and you can see that even more of that dynamic range becomes apparent, because you can tell that we got this bump out of the release or the final section of the first chorus, just for it to go down a little bit once again and let the second verse, which is shorter, just get us prepared for the return of the fantastic chorus, for it to develop more momentum, more intensity, and then the fantastic drop happens, where the dark sounding part that I like so much takes place. This drop in volume is not just due to the fact that the mix itself is quieter in nature, but also you see that they removed some of the elements of the ensemble. The song is no longer as populated by instruments in that part. We're left with the vocals, the drone note being played by a synthesizer, which please tell me if you happen to know what kind of synths were used during the production of that album, because, well, I don't know if you can tell, but I happen to be a fan of those devices as well. And I always like to see what kind of stuff has been done or used in music. But we were left with those synths and the ones playing the arpeggiated or sequenced synthesizer taking place on the stereo field during that section. You can see that the drop was so dramatic, but it allows for the return of the chorus the third time, louder, more impactful, more emotional, simply better and crowd-pleasing section. So good. This is one of the tracks, if not the best track I have ever reviewed in this channel, that showcases the power of dynamic range in music. It is here where you can see that having loud sections with quieter sections in between allows for a much better sounding mix, which translates in a much more emotional, impactful song, and of course will make you much more money because more people will enjoy it. Makes sense, right? Okay, let's finish this off because the song is badass. Wow. The ending, if you're wondering what kind of sound was that, that was an electric guitar being played with not a pick, but something known as an EVO, which in simple terms creates, and it's going to be super crazy, but you'll see, it creates a magnetic field that once you put the EVO on top of the string of your electric guitar, will keep the string vibrating for as long as the device is on top of the string, creating a frictionless sound, something similar to the sound of a cello or akin to it because it sounds totally different. But that's why you get that thing that it's super unique sounding. And yeah, I like it a lot, and it was very well done and extremely well used because you saw that they were playing around with it, pushing it to different sides and creating effects with it. One more thing, at the end you can tell that the guitar player, which please remind me the name of the guitar player in this album, was rocking a super high gainy amp. A high gain amp refers to a metal sounding amp. It was like, and you can hear the and at the end it's super heavy. I can assure you that during the live shows, this song goes super heavy. Well, I mind because I happen to be a huge fan of heavy metal, so I would love it to be like that. So please tell me what you think about this track, and if you happen to agree or disagree with me, because that's the whole point of this, is me just sharing my thoughts and trying to show some of the tricks and behind the music that we enjoy. So, one more thing, if you happen to be a huge fan of Depeche Mode, please recommend me another track similar to this one, because as I stated during the introduction to this video, I have a huge appreciation for this band, but I happen not to be a fan. But I am starting to think it's because I haven't been exposed to the right music that will resonate with me. So if you happen to know more about their discography, please show me another song similar to this one, because I would be more than happy to analyze it here in the channel and also, well, discuss it with you. If you want to keep the lights on in this dubious organization and you want to keep me working on this kind of videos, the best way to do it is by listening to our music on Apple Music or Spotify, and also by following us on social media such as Instagram and X, because that's the best way for you to get in touch with us in a much more personal basis. Now, as usual, the only thing left to be said is that I gotta remind you that you should never let anybody tell you what to dream about. And remember that I'll see you when I see you.